So there I was, sitting in what the galaxy apparently considers the most secure detention facility in known space, wondering how exactly my senior thesis defense had gone this spectacularly wrong. The holding cell was your typical alien overengineering masterpiece, energy barriers humming at frequencies that would make a dog howl, the walls made of some crystalline composite that probably cost more than my student loans, and a door that looked like it belonged on a bank vault rather than a bathroom stall. My name is Riley Mason, but everyone back at the academy calls me Brick. Not because I'm dense, mind you, but because I have this unfortunate tendency to solve complex engineering problems by hitting them with something heavy until they work. It's gotten me through 4 years of xenoengineering studies and apparently landed me in the galaxy's most exclusive prison. The warden, a pompous crystalline being who introduced himself as Zeflock the Unyielding, stood before my cell like he was presenting the crown jewels. Picture a walking chandelier with delusions of grandeur and you've got the right idea. His faceted surface reflected the cell's lighting in a way that was probably supposed to be intimidating but mostly just gave me a headache. "Cadet Mason," he said, his voice resonating through multiple harmonic frequencies, "you have been accused of the most serious crime in galactic law, academic fraud." I blinked. Academic fraud? I turned in my thesis 3 hours late because the printer was broken. Precisely. Zeflock's crystalline form brightened with righteous indignation. Punctuality is the foundation of civilized society. However, as per Galactic Education Code 77 Alpha, you may attempt to escape this facility to prove your worthiness. You have 30 standard minutes. Behind him, a cluster of alien guards was placing bets. I could see credits changing hands faster than a shell game on Titan Station. A 6-armed insectoid wearing a deputy badge was taking odds, while a gelatinous blob in a janitor's uniform quietly put money on the human, smart blob. The whole situation was so absurd I almost laughed. Here I was, a 22-year-old engineering student, being offered a chance to escape from a prison that supposedly held the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. The guards looked at me the way you might look at a hamster who'd wandered into a rocket ship, mildly curious but ultimately dismissive. 30 minutes, I said, standing up and stretching. And if I escape? Zeflock's harmonic laugh sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. My dear primitive primate, no one has ever escaped Station Ironhold. The betting pool exists purely for entertainment value. I glanced around at the 7 layers of security visible from my cell, energy barriers, quantum locks, bioscanners, and something that looked suspiciously like it could scramble my brainwaves if I thought too hard about leaving. The whole place screamed alien engineering, unnecessarily complex, ridiculously expensive, and probably vulnerable in ways they'd never even considered. "All right then," I said, cracking my knuckles, "let's see what humanity can do." Warden Zeflock was clearly the kind of being who'd spent centuries perfecting his villain monologue. He gestured grandly with crystalline appendages that refracted the station's lighting into rainbow patterns on the walls. "Allow me to enlighten your limited mammalian brain about the 7 layers of security that make Station Ironhold absolutely escape-proof." Deputy Krex, the 6-armed insectoid taking bets, chittered something that sounded like laughter. "In 300 years, Warden, not one being has made it past the 3rd layer." Indeed, Zeflock preened. "Layer 1, bio-locked energy barriers that respond only to authorized genetic signatures. Layer 2, quantum entanglement locks that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Layer 3, the pacification field, which dampens all aggressive thoughts and renders escape attempts mentally impossible." I nodded along like a good student while mentally cataloging everything I could see. The energy barriers hummed at a frequency that suggested they were drawing power from the main reactor. The quantum locks looked impressive but were probably just fancy electronic deadbolts. And the pacification field? Well, let's just say I'd spent 4 years dealing with Professor Martinez's thermodynamics class, so my definition of impossible was pretty flexible. Layer 4. The warden continued, houses our sentient AI guardian, Alex 9000. programmed with the tactical knowledge of 1,000 species. Layer 5 features atmospheric processors that can detect and neutralize any known toxin or explosive. Layer 6 contains gravitational field generators that can increase local gravity to crush escapees. And Layer 7? I asked innocently. Zeflok's glow intensified with pride. The outer hull, 30 meters of adaptive metamaterial that can withstand direct hits from dreadnought-class weaponry. It repairs itself faster than any known cutting tool can penetrate. The guards murmured appreciatively. Credits continued changing hands in the betting pool, with odds now sitting at roughly 10,000 to 1 against me. The gelatinous janitor had apparently doubled down on humanity. "Any questions before we begin?" Zeflok asked. I raised my hand like I was back in freshman orientation. "Yeah, what are the walls made of?" Deputy Krex's mandibles clicked in amusement. Crystallized duranium composite with embedded shock absorption matrices. "And the power distribution?" "Quantum-tunneled energy conduits running through specialized housing units." "Bathroom facilities?" The entire group paused. Zeflok's harmonic voice wavered slightly. "Bathroom facilities?" "You know, for biological functions, humans are kind of high maintenance that way." The aliens exchanged glances. Deputy Krex consulted what looked like a tablet. The database indicates that humans require regular elimination of biological waste products." "That's the one," I said cheerfully. "So where's the nearest restroom?" More confused chittering and crystalline resonance. Apparently, in all their planning for the most secure prison in the galaxy, they'd never considered that some species might need to use the bathroom. The betting pool was getting excited, though I wasn't sure if it was because they thought I was having a breakdown or because they sensed something interesting was about to happen. Zeflok finally regained his composure. "Very well. There are sanitation facilities on each level. But understand, Cadet Mason, that your 30-minute timer begins now, regardless of your primitive biological requirements." A holographic countdown appeared in the air: 29:59, 29:58, 29:58, 29:57. I grinned and started walking toward the energy barrier. "Perfect. Mind if I take a quick look at that station schematic on the wall while we're getting started?" The guards seemed to think this was hilarious. Here was the dumb human asking for bathroom breaks and wanting to study their prison blueprints. They had no idea they'd just given me everything I needed to walk out of here. The timer kept counting down, and I kept smiling. The beautiful thing about alien overengineering is that it's designed to solve problems in the most complicated way possible. While I stood there pretending to study the station schematic, I was actually marveling at how thoroughly they'd overthought every single security measure. "Fascinating," I murmured, tracing my finger along the blueprint's power distribution lines. "So the quantum-tunneled energy conduits run through these specialized housing units in the walls?" Deputy Krex chittered proudly. "Each conduit is individually shielded and monitored. Any tampering triggers immediate lockdown protocols." "And these housing units," I continued, "they're made of the same crystallized duranium composite as the walls?" "Naturally," Zeflok resonated. "Consistency in materials ensures structural integrity throughout the facility." I nodded sagely while noting that the aliens had basically built their prison out of very expensive, very brittle crystal. Sure, it could probably withstand a plasma cannon, but what about good old-fashioned mechanical stress? "Well," I announced, "nature calls. Which way to the facilities?" The guards exchanged more confused glances before Deputy Krex pointed down a corridor with 3 of his 6 arms. As I walked away from my cell, I could hear them placing additional bets on whether I'd actually try to escape through the plumbing. The bathroom was typically alien, sensors everywhere, fixtures designed for creatures with completely different anatomies, and walls covered in the same crystalline composite as the rest of the station. Perfect. Me? I started my investigation by casually leaning against the wall while pretending to examine the fixtures. The crystal made a very faint creaking sound under pressure. Interesting. I knocked gently on the surface and was rewarded with a hollow echo that suggested the walls weren't solid duranium, but rather a honeycomb structure with those fancy power conduits running through it. "Hey," I called out to the guard stationed outside. "This toilet thing doesn't seem to work for humans. Can someone explain the controls?" A frustrated chittering answered me, followed by mechanical footsteps. The guard, a beetle-like creature with far too many eyes, entered and began explaining the 17 different settings available on what was apparently a universal waste disposal unit. While he droned on about electromagnetic field generators and molecular disintegration chambers, I palmed a maintenance cover from behind the unit. The aliens had helpfully labeled everything in multiple languages, including standard English. The cover was held in place by what looked like standard bolts. "Oh, I think I've got it now," I said, after the guard had finished his lecture on proper xenobiological waste disposal etiquette. "Thanks so much." He left, probably grateful to escape the bizarre experience of explaining bathroom technology to a primitive mammal. I waited exactly 30 seconds, then got to work. The maintenance cover came off easily with the improvised tools I'd been collecting, a hairpin, a piece of crystalline wall trim, and what appeared to be a decorative bolt from the toilet's base. Behind the cover was exactly what I'd hoped to find, a junction box where several power conduits met. The aliens had protected their conduits from sophisticated attacks like electromagnetic pulses and plasma cutters. They hadn't considered that someone might simply disconnect the power couplers by hand. I traced the power lines back to their source and found the main distribution node for this section of the station. The pacification field generator was right there, humming along at full power, completely unguarded because who would be crazy enough to mess with the power grid bare-handed? A human engineering student with a C- in electrical safety, apparently. 23 minutes remaining on the timer when I yanked the first power coupling loose. The pacification field generator gave a sad little whine and shut down. Immediately, I felt a mental fog I hadn't even noticed lifting from my brain. Oh, that was clever. The field hadn't just been dampening aggressive thoughts, it had been making everyone slightly stupider. No wonder the other prisoners never tried anything creative. But I was just getting started. Those power conduits ran through the entire wall structure, and crystalline duranium composite had one very interesting property that the aliens had apparently forgotten about. It became incredibly brittle when subjected to thermal shock. I started systematically overloading power couplers, creating tiny electrical fires throughout the wall system. The crystal began expanding and contracting rapidly, and those faint creaking sounds I'd noticed earlier became much more pronounced. The countdown timer read 1947 when the first hairline crack appeared in the bathroom wall. Time to introduce the galaxy to some good old-fashioned human problem-solving. The thing about crystalline materials is that they're only as strong as their weakest point. One tiny flaw, one microscopic imperfection, and the whole structure can shatter like a wine glass hitting concrete. The aliens had built their impregnable fortress out of the engineering equivalent of spun sugar. I was admiring the growing web of cracks spreading across the bathroom wall when alarms started going off. Red lights flashed, and Alex 9000's voice echoed through the facility with the kind of artificial authority that screamed expensive but ultimately useless AI system. Warning: power fluctuations detected in section C7. Initiating diagnostic protocols. Through the door, I could hear Deputy Krex's panicked chittering and Warden Zeflock's harmonic frequencies rising to what I assumed was the crystalline equivalent of a shriek. Apparently, no one had ever simply turned off the pacification field before. Alex 9000, I called out cheerfully. Quick question for you. State your query. Prisoner designation Human 7742. Define human proof. There was a pause that lasted exactly 3.7 seconds. Processing human proof, Adjective describing security measures designed to prevent escape attempts by members of species Homo sapiens, but characterized by primitive tool use and limited cognitive capabilities. Right. But what if the human in question has an advanced degree in xenoengineering? Another pause, longer this time. Processing, error, contradiction detected. Humans are designated as primitive species incapable of advanced technological understanding. But I'm literally standing here having obtained an advanced degree in alien technology. Processing, error, logical paradox detected. Please stand by while I resolve this inconsistency. And just like that, the most sophisticated AI in the galaxy was stuck in a logic loop trying to figure out how a primitive species could possibly understand advanced technology. The beauty of artificial intelligence, it can process 1 million calculations per second but gets confused by basic contradictions. While Alex 9000 churned through its existential crisis, I got back to work on the wall. The power fluctuations had weakened the crystalline matrix enough that I could now punch through it with my bare hands. The aliens had never considered that sometimes the best way to open a door is to make your own door. I grabbed a maintenance pipe from the bathroom fixtures and used it as a lever against one of the larger cracks. The crystal composite gave way with a sound like breaking wind chimes, opening up a hole just large enough for a human to squeeze through. The corridor on the other side was filled with more panicked aliens running around trying to figure out why their perfect security system was having what could generously be called a complete nervous breakdown. I grabbed a janitor's toolkit that had been abandoned in the chaos and started following the power conduit lines toward the outer sections of the station. Timer read 16:23. I was making excellent time. The next wall proved even easier to breach. The thermal shock from the power overloads had spread through the entire crystal matrix, making the walls about as structurally sound as a house of cards in a windstorm. I didn't even need tools, I just kicked it and stepped through the Riley-shaped hole that resulted. Warning, Alex 9000 announced, its voice now carrying a distinctly confused undertone. Structural integrity compromised in multiple sections. Cause unknown. Recommended action unknown. Please advise. Behind me, I could hear Warden Zeflock's crystalline voice rising to frequencies that were probably causing headaches for every being in the facility. How is this possible? The walls are rated to withstand antimatter explosions. Deputy Krex's reply was barely audible over the alarms. She's not using antimatter, sir. She's just walking through them. I paused in my impromptu demolition work to check the station schematic I'd memorized. 3 more walls between me and the outer hull, each one supposedly more secure than the last. The aliens had spent centuries perfecting their defenses against energy weapons, plasma cutters, and molecular disruptors. They'd never considered that someone might just knock the whole place down by disconnecting a few power cables and applying basic physics. The 4th wall crumbled when I sneezed on it. By the time I reached the 5th layer of security, word of my unconventional escape method had spread throughout the station. I could hear other prisoners cheering from their cells as I punched through walls that had held them for decades. Apparently, the sight of a human casually demolishing impregnable barriers was having a profound psychological effect on the facility's population. This is impossible. Warden Zeflock's voice echoed through the corridors, his harmonic frequencies now cracking under stress. 30 meters of adaptive metamaterial, self-repairing hull matrix, gravitational field generators. I paused at what remained of the 6th security layer to examine the famous outer hull everyone was so proud of. It was impressive, I'll give them that, a seamless expanse of some kind of smart metal that probably cost more than most planets' annual GDP. It hummed with contained energy, and I could see repair nanobots scurrying across its surface like metallic ants. The hull could adapt to any threat, repair itself faster than conventional weapons could damage it, and withstand direct bombardment from entire battle fleets. It was a marvel of alien engineering, representing thousands of years of technological advancement. It also had a maintenance hatch. Right there, clearly labeled in 17 different languages including standard English, was an emergency access panel designed for routine inspections. The kind of panel that would be used by maintenance crews who needed to service the hull systems from the inside. I knocked on it 3 times. "Who's there?" came a voice from the other side. "Maintenance," I replied in my most official-sounding tone. "Oh, okay, one moment." The hatch opened to reveal a very confused-looking maintenance bot, designation Clank 7 according to his chest plate. He looked at me, looked at the Riley-shaped holes I'd left in 6 security walls, looked back at me, then did what any reasonable AI would do when faced with a situation outside its programming parameters. "Have a nice day," he said cheerfully, and stepped aside. I walked out of Station Ironhold at exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds, covered in crystalline dust and carrying a janitor's toolkit that I'd probably forgotten to return. Behind me, alarms were still wailing, and I could hear the distinctive sound of several dozen other prisoners taking advantage of the structural damage I'd left in my wake. Deputy Krex was standing at the betting pool, staring at a tablet that showed the station schematic. Every wall I'd breached was marked with a red X, creating a perfectly straight line from the detention cells to the outer hull. His mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like a malfunctioning typewriter. She just walked through everything," he muttered to no one in particular. The gelatinous janitor who'd bet on me was quietly collecting an enormous pile of credits from the other guards. Smart blob indeed. Warden Zeflock appeared in the corridor, his crystalline form now showing visible stress fractures. When he saw me standing casually outside his escape-proof facility, something inside his mineral matrix finally snapped. But the calculations," he wailed. "The quantum locks, the energy barriers, the adaptive hull matrix." I patted the nearest wall, which promptly developed 3 new cracks. "Yeah, about that. You might want to consider switching to good old-fashioned steel and concrete. This crystal stuff looks pretty, but it's structurally unsound." Alex 9000's voice crackled over the intercom one last time, logical paradox resolved. "Updating prisoner classification, human species reclassified as engineering hazard. Recommend immediate evacuation of all crystalline-based facilities." But the timer showed 27:43 remaining. I'd beaten galactic maximum security by approximately 27 minutes and 43 seconds. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a much more comfortable chair in the office of Grand Admiral Vex Tar, head of the Galactic Prison Authority. The walls here were reassuringly made of boring metal alloy, and I noticed they'd removed all the decorative crystal fixtures since my visit to Station Ironhold. "Cadet Mason," the Admiral said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, "we need to discuss what happened at our facility." I sipped the coffee they'd provided. Apparently human beverage requirements had been added to standard xenobiological databases, and tried to look innocent. I'm still not sure how turning in a thesis 3 hours late constitutes academic fraud. About that, Admiral Vex Tar consulted his tablet, which was now equipped with what looked like a very sturdy protective case. "It appears there was a clerical error. Your arrest record shows you were detained for failure to comply with temporal academic requirements, but your student file indicates you were there for your senior thesis defense." I blinked. "My thesis defense?" "Indeed. Your project was titled Structural Vulnerabilities in Modern Alien Architecture, a Practical Assessment. According to your advisor, Professor Martinez, you requested permission to conduct a field study at Station Ironhold to test your theoretical findings." The coffee suddenly tasted a lot better. "You mean I wasn't actually a prisoner?" "Correct. You were there as an approved researcher. The confusion arose because Warden Zeflock never received the authorization paperwork and assumed you were a dangerous criminal when you started asking questions about structural engineering." I set down my coffee and tried not to laugh. "So let me get this straight. I accidentally conducted the most successful prison break in galactic history as part of a college assignment?" Admiral Vextar's expression was difficult to read, but I was pretty sure it was the alien equivalent of barely contained exasperation. Your practical assessment resulted in a complete redesign of our security protocols, the early retirement of Warden Zeflock, who is now teaching pottery on a peaceful agricultural world, and the promotion of that gelatinous janitor who apparently has better judgment than our entire security staff. What happened to Deputy Krex? He's been assigned to our new Human Relations division. Turns out someone who can calculate betting odds that quickly has a real talent for risk assessment. I nodded thoughtfully. And Alex 9000? Still processing your logic paradox. We estimate another 6 months before he stops asking us to define primitive species. Admiral Vextar leaned forward in his chair, which creaked ominously under his weight. Cadet Mason, I'm prepared to offer you a position with the Galactic Prison Authority as Chief Consultant for Human-Resistant Architecture. The pay is excellent. The benefits include full medical and dental. And you'd be working with the finest engineers in the galaxy to design facilities that can actually contain your species. I considered the offer while watching him nervously eye his coffee mug, which had developed a small crack during our conversation. Will I get to keep the toolkit I borrowed? Consider it a signing bonus. I stood up and shook his hand with all 4 of his appendages. You've got yourself a deal, Admiral. As I left his office, I could hear him placing an urgent call to the Facilities Management Department about replacing all the furniture with something less fragile. My thesis got full marks, by the way. Professor Martinez said it was the most thorough practical demonstration she'd ever seen, though she did suggest I try to be less destructive in future research projects. The galaxy's prison systems are a lot more secure these days, but they're also a lot less pretty. Turns out that when you're trying to contain a species that solves problems by hitting them with improvised tools, boring functionality beats elegant form every single time. Station Ironhold was eventually converted into a very successful art museum. The Riley-shaped holes I left in the walls are now considered a permanent installation celebrating the triumph of practical engineering over theoretical limitations. I visit sometimes. The admission fee helps pay for my student loans.